All right, good evening. My name is Catherine and I work with SEB Housing. And this is the information session for the 40 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at Hanover Stoneham in Stoneham, Massachusetts. So the purpose of this session is to give you a little bit more background information on the available units, but I'm also going to cover the application, the eligibility and the lottery processes and what to expect after the lottery is run. So if you have any questions during the session, you're encouraged to either type them into the chat in the Zoom app, or I'll be asking throughout the presentation if you have any questions. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself at that time. When you came into the session, you saw that your microphone was muted, and that is just so we can minimize any outside noise. So this is a live session. It's being recorded, and it's going to be saved to SEB Housing's YouTube channel. And that's because we want to make sure that anyone who wasn't able to attend that would like to view it is able to do so. So if you have any issues with viewing this or hearing me, please let me know throughout. But just to start out, some background information on who we are. So SEB Housing, we're an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team at Hanover Stoneham. We haven't seen the property in person. We've been hired by the developer and the management team to market the affordable unit, conduct this information session, collect and review applications from applicants to determine eligibility and to ultimately run the lottery. So in the initial phases of this process, we're your main point of contact rather than the management office. But then further along in the process, the on-site management team at Hanover Stoneham is going to be your main point of contact for these units. So there's a few different steps. The first step is to apply for the lottery. And if you're found to qualify for the affordable housing program based off of the application that you submit, you'll be in touch with SEB Housing during that process. We can answer any questions you have on the application or the lottery, and we'll process your application and run that lottery. The second step in the process is if your position is high enough on the waiting list, you'll be put in contact with the leasing office, so the management team that is going to be set up over at Hanover Stoneham. And they're going to determine your lease eligibility. So that's separate from SEB Housing's screening. That lease eligibility screening is similar to if you've rented an apartment before, you've probably had a credit check, rental history check, reference checks, background checks, that sort of thing. So that's going to be part of what the lease eligibility screening by the management team will entail. If you're found lease eligible, you can reserve one of these affordable apartments. And then step 3, you'll be referred back over to SEB Housing to then supply us with the supporting documentation, including your pay stubs, your income, asset, and tax documentation to make sure that we're able to confirm that you're eligible for the affordable housing program. If you are, you'll be put back in touch with the leasing office, and that unit that you reserved, you'll be able to then sign a lease for it. So again, few steps in the process, but the first is to apply for the lottery. So if you haven't already, you can go to our SEB Housing's website and click on Affordable Housing Opportunities. If you select I want to rent, since this is a rental opportunity, you'll see that Hanover Stoneham has a page specific to the property. There's going to be downloadable versions of the application, information packet, as well as a JotForm link, which you can see on your screen now. So that jotform.com SEB Housing /Hanover Stoneham, that is the online application. So we encourage you to complete your application online, since it's going to be the quickest way to apply, and it's going to ensure that your application is received right away. Once you've submitted that online application, you'll receive a confirmation email. It's just an automated email that comes back to you letting you know that your application has been received, and it will be followed up again with a personal email from SEB Housing once we review it. If for any reason the online application is not an option for you, you can download the lottery application on our website. You can request a paper application to complete. If you're completing a paper or a PDF application, you could submit it to us in one of several ways. So you could email it and scan it over to us. you would send it to info@sebhousing.com. You can send it by fax. The fax number is on the first page of the application. You can send it by regular mail. If you happen to be in the Needham area, that's where our office is. So you could drop it at our drop box to the left of our building at 257 Hillside Ave in Needham. So whichever one of those options works best for you. Again, we do encourage you to submit your application online just because it's the quickest way to get it into us, but we understand that not everyone would prefer that method. So we do encourage you to get your lottery application in early. It's fairly brief, so it shouldn't take you too long to complete. Because there's no supporting income, asset, or tax documentation needed at this early stage in the process. It will be required later on in the process, like I said. So it's really just you filling out a lottery application to self-report what your finances and household members are. So lottery applications are due by October 25th, so exactly a month from today. And they have to be delivered by 2 p.m. or postmarked by 2 p.m. that day in order to be considered. That JOT form online application will disable. It will no longer be accessible after 2 p.m. on the 25th of October, so just keep that in mind. You do not need to be a resident of Stoneham to apply for this lottery. However, there's going to be a few affordable units that will have local preference for residents of Stoneham or people who work full-time within the town. But again, that's not something that should discourage you from applying at all if you don't qualify for local preference, because there's plenty of units available. So Hanover Stoneham does have a website that you can check out as well. So it's hanoverstoneham.com. And there's more information on their floor plans, photos of the property, additional information on amenities. So check that out if you haven't already. The first leases are going to be available in December. And to give you some more information on the property, so Hanover Stoneham, it's a brand new development. And there will be a total of 270 residential units within the building. 40 of those will be affordable apartments leased to households with incomes at or below 80% of the area median income. So all units feature in-unit laundry. There's 3 elevators in the building. There's modern finishes in these apartments. It is a new building, like I said. Amenities at the community include an outdoor pool, a fitness center, a clubhouse for working from home and things like that, a courtyard with outdoor games, grills, fireplaces, that sort of thing. It is a pet-friendly community, so there's a dog park available as well. Tenants are responsible for paying their own utilities, which are gas, heat, and hot water, electric cooking, electricity, water, and sewer. And 1 parking space is included in the rent. There are going to be 5 studio units that are going to rent for $2,133. There are 23 one-bedroom units, which will rent for $2,427. One of those 2-bedroom apartments has been built out for persons with disabilities, so it is considered to be mobility accessible. There's going to be 20, I think I have it wrong there. So this should be 10 2-bedroom units instead of another 23 there. So 10 2-bedroom units that are going to rent for $2,718. And one of those 2 bedrooms is mobility accessible and has features for those with hearing impairment. And then there are 2 3-bedroom units that are going to rent for $3,010. So these affordable rents are not set in accordance with an applicant's income or financial circumstances. So that means that the rent amounts are not going to change if your income changes. For this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that is based off of HUD's area median income or the area median income for Stoneham, which is the Boston area. The rent could increase once per year when HUD, the Housing and Urban Development federal agency, revises their AMIs each spring. There's always advance written notice to a tenant if the rent is going to increase and the rents would never change in the middle of your lease term. So if you were to sign a lease for December of 2024, the rent could not increase until at least December of 2025. Market rate rents in the building are going to be between $2,400 up to $4,900. So these rents are quite a bit lower than those amounts. So since we anticipate there's going to be more interested and eligible applicants than there are available units, these apartments are going to be made available through this lottery process. And they'll only be made available to households who qualify for the affordable housing program and have under that 80% of area median income. And I'll talk about those income limits in just a minute as well. So I talked about the logistical information in terms of, a basic overview of the unit and when to apply, how to apply. So again, just if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. And I'm going to move on to eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So there's 4 eligibility requirements. If you have already looked at or are planning to look at that information packet that is posted on SCB Housing's website, that is where most of this information that I am sharing tonight is going to come from. So these are on page 4 of the information packet. These are the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So the first eligibility requirement is that households have to have qualifying income and assets, and income parameters are on your screen right now, and I'll go through them in just a moment. The second eligibility criteria is that you want to keep in mind for eligibility purposes that household priority is going to be given based on household composition. So for example, if you're a one-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally considered to be a type 1 household. So you can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but larger type 2 and type 3 households are going to be placed ahead of you on that 2-bedroom waiting list. Some examples of a type 2 and type 3 household would be households with 3 or 4 applicants, as well as some 2-person households. Page 7 of that information packet has more details on the household types, and they're also spelled out in the application. So if you're not sure which housing type or household type you are, it's going to spell it out there for you, and you'll check which one is applicable to your family members. The third eligibility criteria is that households can't own a home at the time of their program certification. So if you own a home now, it would need to be sold prior to completing your program certification with SCB Housing. So that's the step, which is a step that's going to take place before your lease is signed. So that's that final step with SCB Housing where we confirm whether or not your household is actually eligible for the program. And then the fourth eligibility criteria, it really doesn't come up very often, but just want to mention that households cannot have financial interest in the development and can't be considered a related party. So if you work for the developer, the management company, you wouldn't be eligible for this opportunity. To circle back on the first eligibility criteria, income and assets. So like I said, these are affordable units. They're being made available to rent at prices that are lower than identical or very, very similar units within the building. And although income verification is not required at the time of your lottery application, I do just want to give you a little bit of an idea as to how we calculate your total household income. So if you are found eligible for the lottery after we review your lottery application, you're going to be emailed a documentation requirements guide, which is basically several pages of a document that's going to detail exactly what types of documentation we're going to need from you depending on your sources of income. So such as how many bank statements we're going to need or how many pay stubs and that sort of thing. So also your federal tax returns from last year will be necessary. And although we don't need any of this verification now, like I said, I just want to kind of go over a little bit of what we'll be asking for. So, and how we'll be calculating the income of your household. So income for this affordable housing program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So all income is included. So that includes, bonuses, overtime, things that may be a little more sporadic. The only exceptions to that are minors. So if you have children in the household, maybe you have a 16-year-old in the household who's earning a wage, we're not going to count that income towards your total household income. The only other exception is dependent full-time students who are working. So maybe you have a 21-year-old who's going to college. We're only going to count the first $480 of those wages when determining your eligibility. The program does require that we count gross income. So not your net income after your taxes are taken out and your health insurance and 401k and that sort of thing. So although you don't take home the full amount of your salary, for example, it is the gross income that we are required to count for this program. And so how we calculate your income is not one size fits all, because there are a lot of different unique circumstances. Some applicants may have a weekly salary or a biweekly salary that's consistent throughout the year, but other people are self-employed or work seasonally. So in those types of circumstances, we may need to look further into your past to be able to project your anticipated income over the next 12 months. And then specifically for applicants who are self-employed, you're going to need to complete a profit and loss statement for your business and provide supporting documentation. Your business expenses, if you're self-employed, are taken into consideration, but for households who are not self-employed, it is always the gross income that we need to count. So if you have, car payments, health insurance payments, and you're not self-employed, we unfortunately can't take those as a deduction from your income, for example. And any income that you have been making in the last 12 months, we're going to assume that you will continue to make it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation from you stating that you're no longer earning a certain income source, maybe a letter from your previous employer stating that you're no longer working with them, or bonuses and overtime won't be applicable this year, won't be available. When you're filling out your application, just make sure that you are not overlooking any of the income sources that are there. So not just wage income, you need to make sure that you're writing in any amounts coming to your household through Social Security, or maybe unemployment benefits, pension benefits, workman's comp, that sort of thing. Just make sure you're writing all those down. Any assets that you have that are generating income, those would need to be written down as well. And just to go back to this slide here, so for the minimum income limits that you see here, there's no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at Hanover Stoneham, want to be sure that all tenants, regardless of whether or not they're renting a market rate unit or an affordable unit, can afford the rent. So the management company has set a minimum household income that's equivalent to 2.5 times the monthly rent. Those amounts are listed on your screen now, and they're also listed in the information packet. So you can see how it says approximate minimum income, and that's because it's a general amount, because it will be the management team ultimately that confirms whether or not your household meets these minimum limits. So, for example, you might have a lot of liquid assets that you're able to access to be able to pay the rent, but your income is a little bit below these amounts. They'll make the call as to whether or not you're able to apply. So as you can see here, households that are looking to rent maybe a 1-bedroom unit, your minimum income, approximate minimum income, would be $72,800. Households with mobile housing vouchers like Section 8 or MRVP, if you're planning to use that voucher at this property, you can disregard the minimum income amounts because they won't apply to your household. But any applicant who does have a housing voucher, we always recommend that you check with the agency that issues administers your voucher to confirm that the rents are within the agency's payment standards and your program's maximum rent. The leasing office at Hanover Stoneham will eventually confirm with your housing authority that the rents are permissible, but that'll be further down the line. So it's best for you to know sooner rather than later if the rents work for your household. Applicants without a voucher, though, so if you don't have a housing voucher, your household income needs to be between these approximate minimum income floor amount, and the program maximum income limit. These amounts, the maximum income limits, are set by the affordable housing program. Those are set in stone. So a one-person household cannot make more than $91,200. You just wouldn't be eligible for this affordable housing program, and therefore not eligible for this lottery. There are no asset limits, though. So if you have a lot of money saved up, maybe you're retired, you have a lot of money in bank accounts and so forth, that's fine. We still need to collect information from you related to your assets, although there is no limit. And that's because any income generated by those assets doesn't need to be counted towards your total household income. So when you're filling out your application, you want to report all of your assets, although they're not going to disqualify you from applying for this lottery. So not just checking and savings accounts, but any net cash value of the 401ks that you have, your Venmo and PayPal accounts, that sort of thing. We don't need you to document any personal assets like jewelry or cars, for example. That's it for eligibility criteria. So again, any questions, let me know, and I'll move on to lottery eligibility. All right, so as I mentioned, just if you're interested in this lottery, we just encourage you to apply as soon as possible, get the process started. We also want to mention too, when you're filling out that application, if you think you might be interested in more than one unit size, so maybe you're interested in both a studio and a one-bedroom, you should indicate that on your application. There's really no downside to doing so. There is a potential downside if you only mark, for example, that you're interested in a one-bedroom, but you might consider a studio. And that's because if you decide later on, after the lottery is run, that you would consider a studio, it might be too late at that point because these waiting lists may have many people ahead of you at that time. So once you submit your lottery application, my colleagues at SEB Housing are going to review that application, contact you if there's any information missing or if anything appears to be incorrect. So you'll have a chance to correct it and resubmit as necessary. If you're completing the lottery application online, like I said, right after you submit your application, you're going to get an automatic confirmation email that it was received, but that doesn't mean that we've reviewed your application yet. That'll come in about a week or two. You'll get another email from us with your lottery application number. So if you're found to be eligible after we've reviewed your application, you'll be sent another email with your lottery application number. It'll be in the form of a series of numbers. That's not a ranking of any sort at this time. So it's just a number that will be drawn in the lottery, just as an anonymous identifier for your household, so your name isn't called during the lottery. It corresponds with the order in which your household was, in which your application was approved. So if you were the very first person to submit or to complete an application for Hanover Stoneham, your number is going to be A.001. That email will also confirm a bunch of information. So you're going to want to review that email and make sure that all of it looks accurate in terms of what you submitted to us. So, excuse me, it's going to confirm whether or not your household reported being a resident of Stoneham, or if you applied for local preference. You won't need to submit anything to us until after the lottery to confirm your local preference. But you want to make sure that you're filling that out correctly, because if you select, yes, I qualify for local preference, but you don't in fact live in Stoneham and aren't able to provide that verification after the lottery, you unfortunately would forfeit your position on the waiting list. So just make sure to fill that out correctly. Pay attention to what you're clicking there. The email that you receive with your lottery application number is also going to confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, so take a look at that. And it's also going to confirm if you indicated that you need a disabled accessible apartment. And applicants who need one of the units with special features are going to have priority for those units over households who don't need the accessible features of those apartments. And then again, the documentation requirements guide that I mentioned before that gives you details on what needs to be submitted to us after the lottery if you're one of those top waiting list households is attached to that email as well. If at any point in the process you're found ineligible for the lottery, excuse me, so maybe you don't get that email from us, maybe you get an email saying you're denied, you're encouraged to contact us with any questions if you think maybe a mistake was made or if you have any questions on why you were denied. The lottery itself is going to take place on November 12th at 6 p.m. and it's very much the same format as this in terms of it's being a Zoom call at 6 p.m. in the evening. More information about the lottery will be included in your eligibility email once the application is approved, but just keep in mind that you don't need to be present for the lottery. The lottery results are going to be shared with all households the following day at the latest, maybe that night. Usually we try to sort the results that night. This lottery is going to be conducted using the website random.org, so that's going to allow for instantaneous results. So the lottery numbers will all be randomized on the screen, and it will be screen shared, and the results of the drawing will be shared with you right away. Every lottery number will be picked. So sometimes when you think of lotteries, you're going to say, okay, there's 40 units, so there's going to be 40 numbers drawn, but that's not how these types of lotteries work. The purpose of the lottery is to just establish an order of priority for the waiting list. So in general, it is beneficial for your number to be called early in the lottery, but it's not necessarily the deciding factor as to whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process to lease one of these units. Because we still need to sort the results, right? Not every household who has a lottery number applied for the same unit type as you, and all of the different household types are mixed in there. So we're going to sort the results by priority. So for example, if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery and they've applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be behind all of the type 2 households on that 2-bedroom waiting list. Also, there's going to be households who were entered into the lottery that are later found ineligible by the leasing office or ultimately decide that they are no longer interested in renting one of the units. So if your number is drawn later in the lottery, you shouldn't lose hope of being able to proceed to the next step in this process. You may still have the opportunity to move forward and rent one of these units. So after the lottery, the waiting lists are going to be populated by myself, taking local preference, whether or not your household requires a disabled accessible unit into consideration. And like I said, we usually try to send those waiting lists no later than early the next morning. And that will be sent to you by email if you have an email address. When you're reviewing that email, you want to find your lottery application number, so that A dot series of numbers. And at that point, you'll have a better idea as to whether or not you're one of the top households on any of the waiting lists, and if you'll be invited right away to move forward in the process, which the next step in the process there is to apply for a lease. When you're reviewing that lottery results email, if your household number, if your application number is highlighted in green, that means that you're going to be invited forward by the leasing office to complete their lease screening. You'll have about 5 days to get in touch with them for that lease screening process. And remember that SEB Housing is screening for your lottery and your program eligibility. It's the management team who's screening for your lease eligibility. So they're going to be doing, a credit check, rental history check, background check, that sort of thing. And we want you to be aware that most leasing offices, and that will be the case here as well, they might invite more households to complete lease screenings than there are available units. So for example, in this lottery, there's 23 one-bedroom affordable units, but there might be more than 23 households invited from the waiting list to complete their lease screening. This is common. Management companies do this often because usually the process of leasing units is pretty slow. There's households who don't respond. There's households who aren't qualified. So they want to make sure that they're reaching out to more people than they have units, just to keep the process going. So if you're one of the households that is contacted, you don't want to immediately inform your current landlord if you're renting that you're giving notice to move, because you haven't yet been lease approved or approved by SEB Housing and submitted all that income information to us. So hold off on that until a little bit later in this process. Once you are lease approved, though, that's the point in the process where having a position at the top, near the top of the waiting list, is beneficial to you. If you're the top household on one of these waiting lists, you'll have the first chance to reserve an affordable unit. So for example, if you have the top position on the 1-bedroom waiting list, you'll have the first choice of the 23 affordable 1-bedroom units. And that's true even if someone behind you on the waiting list completed their lease application first with the management team, because the management office needs to honor the order of the waiting list. So if you're the first person, you get first pick. If the second person on the waiting list is approved, they get the second choice of units, and so forth. Once you've reserved one of the affordable units, the leasing office is going to contact us at SEB Housing, and we'll then coordinate with you to make sure that you're submitting your income, asset, tax documentation that will be required for us to complete your final eligibility review for the Affordable Housing Program. So hopefully by that point, you've been able to review the documentation requirements guide that you were sent along with your lottery application number, and you've gathered some of the documentation needed to do the final review. You have about 10 days to get that information to us. There's a lot of information to submit, so most people don't submit an 100% completed package to us, and that's okay. We'll work with you to make sure that you have everything that we need. Once SEB Housing approves your file, we're going to notify you, and eligible households will then be able to sign a lease and establish a move-in date with the leasing office. Once you've leased, though, you're done with income screenings until your lease renewal date. So a year from now, we hope that you've enjoyed your time living at Hanover Stoneham. If you want to continue living there beyond the first year of the lease, you'll need to recertify your income with the owner or the leasing office prior to your lease renewal. That process usually starts about 3 months before your lease renewal. So if you were moving into a unit in December of this year, you'd probably hear from the leasing office around now to start that process. If your income increased beyond that 80% of area median income at some point during your first year of residency, that's fine. As long as your household income does not exceed 140% of the current year's area median income, you would still be eligible to live in the affordable apartment. Those 140% amounts are listed in the information packet, but just to give you an example, a household of 2 would qualify for this affordable housing unit, this lottery, with an income at or below $104,200. That same family can make up to $145,880 at the time of your recertification next year to remain eligible for the affordable unit that you'd be living in. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there. If someone gets a raise, if you switch jobs and you're now making more money, we want to make sure, or the program wants to make sure that that option is still on the table for most families. So that covers everything I wanted to get to from the information packet. Please let me know if you have any questions. If you think of anything after tonight, the best way to get in touch with us is emailing us at info@sebhousing.com. You can also call us as well. But again, any questions, let me know now. If you think of them, anything I didn't cover that you wanted to know.
Hello.
Hello. Do you have a question?
Hello.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, and just a quick question. When was the move-in date that you're anticipating?
So they're anticipating that the first leases will be available for December. Um, I don't know if that means December 1st or sometime in December, but that's what they're hoping. The management team is supposed to be hired for early November. So yeah, they'll be ready to work with households after the lottery to establish those move-in dates.
Thank you.
Yep. And again, you're just encouraged, there's still a month left, but if you're interested in this opportunity, October 25th is the lottery application deadline. And then, like I said, any questions for us between now and then, or even after then, info@sdbhousing.com is our email address and the easiest way to get in touch with us. All right, I appreciate your attendance, and like I said, this will be posted to our YouTube channel for anyone who is watching after the fact. Have a good night.